Thank you for being here. I'm Terri Kimball, President and CEO of the Chandler Chamber, and I want to thank you for joining us on our public policy series. This is brought to you in part by the industrial development of the city of Chandler. I would like to do a huge thank you to our sponsors who really believe and support our public policy efforts and how policy is very important to them and their companies. We have SRP, Intel, Dignity Health, Southwest Gas, Air Products, Catalyst Computer Technologies, Terri McKibbins with Edward Jones, and Dragon Walk Fine Chinese Restaurants. So I want to acknowledge all of them and thank them for their continued support here of our public policy series. It is now my pleasure we are going to start. Today's whole topic is all about transportation. And so between myself and I also want to acknowledge Elin Cruz. Elin is with SRP and she is our public policy chair, and you're going to hear from her. But let me go ahead and get this kicked off and started with our first speaker. We have the privilege of having with us Chairman Jack Sellers from the Maricopa County Board of Supervisors. So Jack has joined the Board of Supervisors in February of 2019. Wow, how time flies. After a unanimous appointment to fill the empty seat representing District 1. Mr. Sellers previously served 2 years on the Chandler City Council and served as chairman of the Arizona State Transportation Board. He has also had a position with the GPEC, which is our Greater Phoenix Economic Council, International Leadership Council, and the Arizona-Mexico Commission, as well as the Arizona Sister Cities. Jack believes that improving the quality of life across the region by encouraging a vibrant economy that utilizes technology to ensure we are a smart region. He's also a huge advocate for intelligent infrastructure development and autonomous vehicles, maintaining relationships with MAG, which you're going to hear from Audra in a little bit, Valley Metro, ADOT, and the Federal Highway Administration. So Chairman Sellers, thank you so much for joining us.
Good morning. You know, it's always a treat to talk with this group. This chamber plays such an important role in keeping our community moving forward that I always appreciate the opportunity to work with all of you. I must admit it's frustrating that I've not spent as much time recently on my stated priorities as I would like. As chairman, I've had a few distractions. So I get to talk with you here frequently. I'll keep my remarks brief so that you have plenty of time to hear from and ask questions of the other presenters. I think you know that this year my key priorities for our region are to promote policies that move us towards becoming a truly smart region and to craft a critical infrastructure plan that supports our growing economy. Intelligent vehicles and infrastructure will significantly increase capacity on our system and make our roadways much safer, but we still need additional capacity to handle growth and to move commerce. A few encouraging things have happened or are happening, like the South Mountain Freeway and the additional lanes on the Price Freeway being completed prior to the start of the improvements on the I-10 Broadway curve. And I'm proud that I've been able to play a role in ensuring that those projects were completed prior to this major disruptive project starting. The governor recently announced a plan to infuse $230 million into some key infrastructure projects like the I-10 to Gila River Bridge, continuing improvements to I-17, improvements to State Route 93 north of Wickenburg, which is part of our future I-11. All those things are encouraging. And a friend of ours from MAG will cover a lot of the critical projects that are scheduled for this region and the work being done now in planning for Prop 400E. So let me just talk a little about what I'm concerned about with our future planning. Using proposition dollars to invest for our future growth is the intended use. But sales tax initiatives are supposed to be for capital projects, not for ongoing maintenance, system maintenance. And right now, we don't even have enough dollars to pay for maintenance of our existing infrastructure. I feel that whenever practical, paying for maintenance should be based on use. So we need to be pressuring our legislature to find a way to cover infrastructure maintenance cost. Another concern is ensuring that our plan has enough flexibility to take advantage of our rapidly changing technology. Exact details for the plan should be up to our local metropolitan planning organization, working directly with our community, rather than defined in the legislation. Also, a metropolitan area the size of ours needs to have a viable transit system. With rapid changes in autonomous vehicles, the face of transit is changing. You know, things like, will transit system even need fixed rails in the future? So we need to be ready to take advantage of those changes. I also think that Maricopa County should be given the same latitude as every other county, which allows giving voters an opportunity to vote on up to a 1-cent sales tax proposition. You know, we would never ask for something the voters didn't want, but we should not be treated differently than all of the other counties. And now with Congress discussing a major infrastructure funding plan, will we have plans ready and have matching funds available when needed to get projects? If we're going to continue to grow our economy without damaging the lifestyle that attracts people and companies to move to this region, we absolutely need to have a long-term plan that addresses our critical infrastructure, along with identified funding. As the past chair of the State Transportation Board, I continue to stay in touch with key contacts on projects that are important for our state's economic future. Example, I'm working with Pinal County on things like State Route 24 extension to Ironwood, the North-South corridor, and State Route 347, you know, like the bridge over the railroad tracks that's completed and now considering an overpass at Riggs. Looking at our future planning, State Route 30 is an extremely expensive project, but I-10 West is already extremely congested, and it's a major corridor for our commerce. I'm also anxious to see us advance support for I-11 to support continuing growth. As your county supervisor, the main part of my job is to stay connected to municipal leadership in my district, and I'm excited that I have the opportunity to continue to influence things that are truly critical for our economic future. And I think probably you'd like to hold questions until we get to the end of all the speakers. Is that true? Hello?
Hi, Supervisor. Sorry, I was in mute. So we can have questions right now from the audience. Feel free to post them in the chat box. Or if we don't have questions yet, we can wait till the end and see what questions we get.
Okay. I'm happy to take any questions on any topic.
All right. Well, I don't see any questions for the moment, but I'm sure they will come in shortly. So we will wait till the end to address them, if that's fine.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor. And I am now introducing our next speaker, Audra Kester Thomas, Transportation Planning Program Manager with MAG. A proud graduate of Texas A&M University, Audra joined Maricopa Association of Governments in 2015 to facilitate long-range transportation planning efforts for the nation's second largest metropolitan planning organization. Previously, Audra's work included dozens of iconic land use, transportation, and economic development efforts across Arizona and the Southwest. Audra's current focus is leading the development of MAG's next regional transportation plan and the extension of the county's dedicated sales tax to fund multimodal transportation investments. Audra, thank you for joining us, and the floor is yours.
The pleasure's mine. Thank you for inviting MAG to present a great introduction by Chairman Sellers, and excited to talk about the future of transportation for this region. I'm going to start off with a little bit of a history, orient you to the Maricopa Association of Governments if you are not already familiar. Talk about the important historical regional investments we've already made, which really have shaped the valley. And then ultimately that our key focus, as Chairman Sellers had indicated, development of a new long-range transportation plan for the region, which will inform an extension of our dedicated sales tax in the county. This is an overview of our Metropolitan Planning Organization. MPOs are creatures of the federal government. MAG was established approximately 55 years ago or so by way of Congress, whereby federal transportation dollars were intended to now be directed more to where the people were at. 60 years ago, our cities and metropolitan areas were growing rapidly, and Congress wanted to make sure that federal transportation dollars were being spent where the people were at. And therefore, anytime that there is a urbanized area within the country, a metropolitan planning organization is developed, and they're stewards of both the regional transportation planning efforts, so decisions of our system investments, freeways, highways, critical transportation or transit investments, but also then the funding that is associated with it. As noted, we are the second largest geography for metropolitan planning organizations. We're all of Maricopa County. And then in 2010, as you and Chandler can imagine, our urbanized area continued to grow into the Southeast Valley and Santan Valley. So our metropolitan planning area grew and now includes the city of Maricopa, all of the Gila River Indian community, down to the town of Florence and up through Apache Junction, making for a very large and very diverse constituency for us to represent, making some of our transportation planning challenges even more interesting. For the rest of my presentation, I'm really going to focus on our regional transportation investments we have already made, and then talk to the future of opportunities that lie ahead. Really unique to this region is the local investment that was initiated back in the 80s. We were a fast-growing region. We're fairly young, really, in terms of our maturity. And unlike our neighbors in the Midwest or out east, have not benefited from as large of a federal investment to establish key infrastructure. So in the 80s, as we were rapidly growing, our mayors came together, indicated that they couldn't wait any longer on the federal government, and decided to ask voters for the endorsement of a dedicated sales tax to establish at that point in time what we know today as our freeway loop system. When you look even at the I-10 corridor that goes from coast to coast, ocean to ocean, thinking about how new our infrastructure is, the last portion of Interstate 10 was right here in the valley, downtown Phoenix through the Deck Park Tunnel, and that was in the 1990s. So for any of you who have been here a few decades, you know how important and how much these important transportation investments have really shaped the valley and really serve as the economic engine for the state of Arizona. Well, this region was one of the first to establish a sales tax dedicated to transportation back in the 80s. We were emulated and now have been far surpassed by other regions in transportation investments. Policymakers recognize constituents prioritize transportation, not just as an amenity in these communities, but as a need to get to jobs, education, the amenities that they enjoy throughout their own regions. And this has been an important tool for regions across the country, especially when it comes down to economic competitiveness. While our first 20 years of an investment, that sales tax was really initiated the loop freeway system you see here. In the early 2000s, our planning work continued. Our mayors came back together, indicated we needed to continue this dedicated transportation investment. And in 2003 and 2004, worked together to develop a new plan, this time multimodal in nature. So it included investments, of course, to finish out our freeway network, but also transit investments, as noted by Chairman Sellers. Notably, the light rail investment in the first 10 miles, you'll see here on the map, But what's not indicated here on the map are two other important components of this investment. Arterial roadway network. We invested about 10% of our funding in arterials, many of which are projects that landed in Chandler, but also bus transit. The region does support a small amount of funding for regional transit, also something that's delivered in and throughout the city of Chandler. While they're not indicated here on this map, recognize those are important components of our transportation network. And these regional investments that one city couldn't do on their own are critical to our ability to prosper. You'll notice just with the freeway network alone, on average, we save about 105 hours a year in our daily commutes because of that high capacity, important freeway network. For you, this is not a shock. 80% of our jobs are located within a mile or two of our freeway network or our light rail network. And you'll see the important connection to the compounding investment of transportation, lifting and empowering the localized investment and valuation of property adjacent to those facilities. As noted, when we talk about our Prop 400 era investments, they're divided between our three major programs. The lion's share of our funding goes to these three programs. 56% of the sales tax goes to our freeway program, 33 1/3 to transit, and then 10%, as noted, to our arterial program. I want to acknowledge that while smaller perhaps in size and scale, we do have several other really important programs. Active transportation, enabling both bicycle and pedestrian investments throughout our communities, safety, air quality. We are in a non-attainment area for air quality. That means we have to go through a conformity process to ensure our transportation plan meets our federal targets. And therefore, we have many programs, including air quality, that we invest in to ensure our progress towards those goals. So our current tax initiative, our extension of the sales tax expires in the year 2025. For some of you, that may seem still like several years away. For those of us who do long-range planning, it's like tomorrow. So we've been busy working with Chairman Sellers, Mayor Hartke, and our other mayors to develop our next regional transportation plan, wrestling with some key questions for our future. And the rest of my presentation will really focus on these elements and where we're heading. So I want to start with our goals for our regional transportation plan. I want to highlight one in particular, one that's important to Chairman Sellers, and I'm glad we coordinated our presentations today. One of our goals is responsiveness, the need for a flexible approach. We are challenged to develop at least a 20 or 25-year plan. So that's looking out to a year 2050. That's a long way away, and things are changing rapidly. We see lots of innovation and emerging technologies that are germane to affecting our transportation options. And we want to make sure we're flexible enough to set aside funding for those emerging technologies and be able to be responsive as government to when those opportunities emerge. Chairman Sellers reminds us often how important that component is looking into the future. And I would say one of the silver linings associated with the pandemic is giving us the reassurance that that flexibility is really prudent and important. I like to joke that 2 years ago when we really started this planning, had I gone to our mayors and said, we want to test out a scenario where in 10 or 15 years, 15% of our population in this region will be working from home. I think I would have been laughed out of the room, but now that doesn't seem so impossible. And in fact, as we pull together scenarios for consideration by our elected officials, we're probably going to be testing out what a 60% work from home palette looks like against our transportation options. I think it just really underscores the importance for that forward thinking plan that certainly our executive director, Eric Anderson, feels strongly about, Chairman Sellers, Mayor Hartke also as well. So we started this effort off identifying what those big regional projects might look like, and you'll see here probably not many surprises. We expect to continue to invest in finishing out our freeway network, in our arterial investments, which are really critical. A unique attribute to this region is our grid and contiguous grid network. That's not only just important for commuting traffic, but enables some really important transit investments. Potential extensions of light rail or even a streetcar, and of course, continuation of building out our fairly new transit system. You also see we've evaluated and been considering other modes, new modes to this region, not necessarily to the rest of the country, including commuter rail as well as bus rapid transit. We went out and asked what we call our member agencies, our cities, towns, counties, Native nations, who sit as our MAG Regional Council. And we asked them for their ideas to submit what they needed, what they saw as future opportunities looking over the next 20, 25 years into the future. And you will see a huge amount of ideas that we received. In fact, in total, last year, we received almost 1,600 different ideas from our member agencies. And the unfortunate and difficult part of this conversation is we have very limited funding. As touched on by Chairman Sellers, while the half-cent sales tax has been instrumental in delivering the transportation investments we all enjoy today, we actually have some other valuable funding sources that come to the region. One of those is the Highway User Revenue Fund, or gas tax in this state. That's a diminishing resource for us. In fact, when adjusted for inflation, the state received more in gas tax in the year 2000 than it did in the year 2019. And over that same time frame, we've actually increased our population by 60%. Simply stated, we have an inverse relationship. We're using our roadways more and more each day and contributing less to their maintenance and operations. And it's a critical issue that needs to be addressed moving forward. As noted, as part of being a metropolitan planning agency, we receive formula funds coming through from the federal government. Those come both from our highway program, but also a transit program. And so you'll see those listed here. In total, an extension of the half-cent sales tax for another 20 years is projected to be about $15 billion. In total, or in combination with our federal funding, we're looking at about $28 billion. But we already have some ongoing commitments, notably our bus transit network, and those commitments you'll see here in the middle column. So when you take away those expected continued investments, we're left with about $22 billion. And I want to particularly point out in the lower corner, that's juxtaposed to approximately $90 billion of needed transportation investments throughout the region. Bottom line, our elected officials have some really tough choices ahead, and we're hoping you can help us with that. You'll see here our performance-based evaluation process. We're required by federal law and state statute to develop a plan that's performance-based. We're letting the data lead, and my job at MAG is to deliver the soundest data-driven technical analysis as possible for our elected officials to make decisions on. That's what we've been doing now. I won't spend a lot of time on this slide, just to let you know and orient you to step 4. We're right now in the scenario development process. So we've gone from a huge universe of potential ideas. Our job now is to develop different suites of projects and programs that we can afford that are within a budget. And we'll be presenting those actually to our elected officials over the upcoming weeks. Looking ahead over our calendar, our focus this spring is developing, receiving feedback on those potential scenarios, and then working with our elected officials to come to a consensus decision about what those key projects and programmatic investments look like for a future of 20 and 25 years. It's noted we're in an air quality containment area. That means we have to go through a federal conformity process that takes 6 months. But our intent by the end of this year is to have a plan and investment strategy that's adopted by our regional council. So we can then next year go to the state legislature and request permission to go to the voters in Maricopa County with a question to continue an investment dedicated to transportation that has been instrumental in our prosperity. As noted by Chairman Sellers, Maricopa County is treated a little uniquely. Not only do we have a prescriptive process in state statute, and as well as dedicating how we have to spend that funding, we also are only limited to a half cent. All other counties in the state can go up to 1 cent. And these are questions our policymakers will be faced with. Our current target is to go to the voters with a plan and a request in November of 2022 for a continuation of this important investment for the region. Wanted to share just a few themes that we have already heard from the public. We have some tough choices ahead. To be clear, not only was the Great Recession difficult for us in the history, certainly in a development pattern, but it hurt as well our Prop 400 program. In fact, we're projecting about 40% less in revenues over this 20 years, basically a loss of 10 years of revenues. And that means real projects that we've had to defer out of the program. Some of the tough choices our elected officials will be faced with is determining whether those deferred projects are still our top priorities. Quite frankly, making some choices about not just needed or wanted projects, but setting aside really needed projects because we just can't afford them. And what we need, what they want, is feedback from the public and stakeholders to help them make those decisions. Some key themes that we've heard already, we see a lot of support for the continued need for choices in mobility throughout the region, specifically continuing to develop our transit network and the important active transportation, those bicycle and pedestrian investments that are really important to community and quality of life factors. There's a real recognition amongst constituents in Maricopa County that we're continuing to grow, and that's not going to end anytime soon, and that we need to be able to be responsive to that growth, be flexible into the future, and be strategic with those investments. There is a high level of emphasis from constituents on the maintenance and preservation of our existing assets. Generally, our infrastructure here in this region is fairly new. I'm sure when folks come to visit you, they remark on the high quality of those investments. Constituents want those maintained. And as noted earlier, we have diminishing resources to do that. It's still a high priority for our constituents, and we continue to see that as a priority. There is a high value placed on safety. You'll note here, particularly for vulnerable users. In this context, there's a lot of recognition that pedestrians, bicyclists are vulnerable. Our arterial grid network is great, but there's sometimes a high rate of speed on those large arterials that have some safety impacts that constituents are very keenly aware of. So more protected infrastructure for those vulnerable users continues to be seen as a priority. And then finally here at the end, an aspiration that the goals for mobility and transportation, the movement of people and goods from here to there, is not mutually exclusive from public health outcomes or environmental sustainability, and intending to want to forward all of those with smart strategic investments. So I wouldn't leave here without the opportunity and have an ask. We need to hear from you. Please jump on our website, follow us on social media, provide our comments. Mayor Harkey, Chairman Sellers need this information from constituents all over the county to inform their decisions over the course of the next several months as we endeavor to develop a forward-thinking plan. We'll be sharing this information with the Chamber. We'd love the Chamber's support. Anytime you follow or even share one of our posts, our audience grows tremendously, and we really thank you for your partnership in advance. We have some tough choices ahead and really need your feedback. So with that, that concludes my presentation. I think Ryan will probably follow up with a real Chandler focus, and we'd be happy perhaps to take your questions at the end.
All right. So Audra, we've got several questions here. Do you want to wait till after Ryan speaks, or do you want to take them now?
I would say it's dealer's choice, whichever you would prefer.
Let's do a couple of quick ones, and then I'll save some of them till the very end, because I think all three of you may want to chime in. Can you, let's take the first one. Can you expand on the Interstate 11, where it starts and stops?
Absolutely. Thank you for that question. So Interstate 11 actually starts down in Nogales and goes north all the way to connecting to Las Vegas. Phoenix and Las Vegas are the only two major metropolitan centers not connected by an interstate. It's because we're fairly new, fast-growing regions, and the interstate system's now 60, 70 years old. I-11 is currently in study. It's in its Tier 1 environmental impact statement led by the Arizona Department of Transportation. They are currently in the final stages of that plan effort intended to establish a 2,000 foot corridor where a future potential alignment would go. Their focus right now is from Nogales up to Wickenburg. 93 North really is the envision for I-11 to Las Vegas. That effort is intended to conclude this spring with a final environmental impact statement. I will state that there is no funding available for implementing Interstate 11. There has been a lot of outreach, over 20,000 comments, I believe, were received. In the metropolitan area of Phoenix, the alignment was originally envisioned to go west of city of Maricopa, up through Goodyear, South Buckeye across the riverbed there, and then north west of the White Tank Mountains, if you can imagine that geography. And we're waiting to receive the final corridor. We intend or have been told that there is expected to be some alignment changes based on the feedback received from the public last year. And we're waiting from ADOT to see what their final recommendation will be.
Great. And I know we have several more questions, but I am going to jump to Ryan. We are going to get to your questions because I think some of these can be answered in Ryan's presentation. Then we'll open it up for all three of you before we go to the elected officials. So at this point, I want to introduce Ryan Peters as the Government Relations and Policy Manager. Ryan serves as the city's designated lobbyist and manages the city's multimodal transportation division. He works to protect the city's interest with various stakeholders, processes, and helps the city resolve issues with external partners. Ryan also serves as the city's lead representative on the private utility and telecommunication matters, such as negotiating right-of-way licenses and franchise agreements. He has more than 15 years of municipal public policy and state legislative experience. Prior to Chandler, Ryan worked for the League of Arizona Cities and Towns, where he served as a legislative associate to represent all 91 cities and towns in Arizona. He has worked as a lobbyist for the city of Glendale and a member of the public policy team at the Arizona Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Ryan has a master's in public administration from ASU and holds a bachelor's of science degrees, also from ASU in political science and psychology. He served 6 years in the United States Marine Corps Reserve. Thank you for your service, including a deployment and support in Operation Iraqi Freedom. He attained the rank of sergeant and earned an honorable discharge for his years of service. So welcome, Ryan.
Thank you, Terry. And thank you, everyone, for giving me the opportunity to visit with you today. I want to recognize the tremendous opportunity we have with Jack Sellers, chairing the Board of Supervisors. He's been a tremendous advocate for transportation. And as we move into the Prop 400 extension, it's critically important that we have someone of his caliber on the Board of Supervisors to contemplate this issue as it moves forward to the next stages of development. And I also want to recognize Audra. She's done a lot of work, I think more than anyone, on the development of a balanced transportation plan. And it seems like every time she speaks, I've heard her speak probably twice a week for the last 2 years. I still learn something new. So thank you, Audra, for all of your work. Let me share my screen. So transportation in Chandler. So we're going to start with transportation today. As you can see, the traffic for the 2018 levels of service, there's a lot of green and a little bit of yellow. Yellow represents a little bit more congestion. And we developed this map through our work on the Transportation Master Plan, which was updated over the last 2 years and ultimately was ratified by the City Council last winter. Here's our active transportation network. Currently, we have about 350 miles of bike lanes, shared use paths, about 17 miles of that is paved. A lot of that is on the SRP Canal, and we're grateful for that partnership, for the opportunity for our residents to use those canals as a great amenity in our community. And there's 24 miles of unpaved active transportation network. Paratransit, we operate about 11 local bus routes. There's approximately 950,000 annual boardings per year. We have 2 express routes that take us to the downtown Phoenix area. Paratransit and Ride Choice, we have 50,000 trips per year that serves a vulnerable population. And the Ride Choice as well is another option for that vulnerable population. There's about 12,000 trips per year there. It should be noted that we're trying to moderate our costs a little bit on the paratransit and Ride Choice users and shift more riders over to Ride Choice. It's actually a better service for them, and it's a lot less expensive for the city of Chandler taxpayers. So we're doing a lot of analysis and study to figure out how we can best manage those 2 programs to ensure that both the users and the taxpayers get the best bang for their buck. First Mile, Last Mile is a pilot program that we launched last fall. As you can see on the map, we have fixed route transit pretty well covered in the northern part of our city, but the southern part of our city does not have a lot of coverage. And a lot of that has to do with just the geography. It doesn't make a lot of sense if a route is going to end at a hard border like the River Indian Community border over there to our west. And so we wanted to make sure that we can figure out a way to serve this population without installing a relatively inefficient fixed route. So what we did is we launched a partnership agreement with Lyft, and residents will get 50% off the cost of their Lyft trips to get them to and from transit stops in the northern part of our city. So far, we've seen a pretty good success with this program. I believe we have between 100 and 200 trips per month, and it seems to be growing each month. So we're really pleased with how this partnership has given us the opportunity to really study transit use in the area and serve a population that was previously underserved. So I mentioned the Transportation Master Plan earlier, gave you a little snapshot of the transportation conditions today. And the master plan was an undertaking that included many countless meetings with members of the public, our Transportation Commission. I believe some of our commissioners actually are represented here at the public policy meeting. I believe I saw John Repar on there, and we're grateful for his service on our commission. But this master plan effort was an undertaking that took about a year and a half of time, and many public meetings. We hired the help of a consultant to help us drive through some of what does the public want to see, and it also informed some of our decision making as we look to submit projects for the regional transportation plan development extension of the Proposition 400. So the survey to the public, we asked them what their current mode of travel is, and as you can tell, almost 100%, the primary mode is a personal vehicle, which is expected. We have a really commuter-friendly community, but we also asked what mode of travel should the city invest in, and there seemed to be a lot of interest in transit and a lot more interest in bike and scooter as well. And then we asked what the primary mode of travel is in 20 years. So you can see it's pretty evenly split across the board, and the public looks for us to make investments in these other modes of travel. So we have a balancing act. We want to ensure that there's not a lot of congestion for today's commuters, but we're also building for the future as we look to make transportation investments. So the roadway element was one component, and I should note that the Transportation Master Plan had 4 elements: the roadway element, transit element, bike and pedestrian, and a relatively new, at least new to us, and we haven't really been able to find an example from across the country, but we also asked, how can we leverage technology? Chandler has a very robust connection to the technology community, and our experience with Waymo taught us that we can't ignore this. So we asked our consultants to take a look at how can we leverage technology and incorporate it into our master plan and make those appropriate investments. So on the roadway element, if you look at the 2040 level of service without improvements, you start to see a little bit more red. If you recall, the map was green from the 2018 level of service, and now we're starting to see a lot more red and yellow. Now, it should be noted that some of the red is intentional. Those are policy decisions, such as on Arizona Avenue through the downtown. It probably doesn't make sense to have that be a 50-mile-an-hour road. So our city council made the policy decision to have that be more of a pedestrian-friendly area. And so I don't expect that red to change. However, other corridors, we need to look at making improvements in those areas. So as you can see, most of the constraints are primarily north of Loop 202. And a lot of that has to do with the age of the area and the ability to make a loop. So you can see the recommendations. We have a network primarily of 4 and 6 lane roads, several 4-lane roads with 6 lanes at intersections north of the 202 and east of Loop 101. We have to be cognizant of how we construct the roads up there. We want to have a little impact on the houses if possible. So what kind of engineering creativity can we come up with to ensure that those roads both serve their intended purpose, but also are relatively low impact to the neighbors. So our current projects that we have under construction, Old Price Road is in Queen Creek. It's an Intel partnership project where Intel and the state of Arizona are actually picking up the entire cost of that project. Gilbert Road, we have a new high school going in, and it was quickly noticed that a lot of improvements need to be made to Gilbert Road to ensure that that maintains its high level of service. Alma School, it goes to Germain. This again is a project that was driven by development in the area, so we're expanding that roadway. And then Cooper Road has been a long-awaited improvement to the southeastern part of our city that just actually began underway in February, and we look for completion in about May of 2022. So coming soon, we also have improvements planned for Ocotillo Road from Gilbert to 148th Street, Chandler Heights in 2 different phases, McKibbin to Gilbert, and then Gilbert to Val Vista, Lindsay Road, and then some alley paving throughout the city. Once most of these roads are completed, as you can see, the improvements are in the southeastern part of our city. That was a policy decision from our council decades past to build out the city. So we should have a complete arterial network throughout the city at the end of this thing. So down the road, we have additional design coming on Alma School for phase 2 from Germain to Queen Creek. And then Cooper Road, Insight Way Collector. As most of you know, Cooper Road ends right at the airport. And we're looking to make improvements to that road to connect to Insight Way and hope to create the opportunities for additional economic development around the airport. So the bike and pedestrian element, bike lanes on all arterials, shared youth path crossings at all arterial roads if warranted. We work closely with our traffic engineering folks to ensure that we're not just installing traffic signals everywhere someone might cross. And we have extensive work that goes into studying that to ensure that there's an appropriate balance between pedestrians and traffic. And we're seeking to add new shared use paths and separated bike lanes, and ultimately an interconnected network of on-street and off-street facilities. So currently under construction, we have bike lanes at McClintock and Kyrene from 202, about a third mile north of Ray, and then Kyrene from Chandler Boulevard to, again, a third of a mile north of Ray. Chandler Boulevard, additional bike lanes from I-10 to 56th Street. And then coming soon, this is an exciting project, Fry Road protected bike lanes from the Paseo Trail to west of Arizona Avenue. This was a federal grant that we received that we're currently under design study for this route on offering a new amenity to connect folks to the downtown from our existing trail network. Pretty excited about this opportunity, and ultimately look to test this as something that doesn't make sense for Chandler and the area. And we also have additional ADA downtown improvements that include sidewalk, curb and ramp improvements throughout the downtown. And then the transit element. I mentioned that our citizens through the master plan have asked for additional transit options. I pointed out one of them with the first mile, last mile program with Lyft. But the master plan also took a look at, again, how do we serve with technology? And they created these flexible transit corridor recommendations that breaks the city up into different zones. And it's basically a hierarchy of connected routes that ultimately we hope will connect us to the fixed route network throughout the valley. So kind of a hybrid of a fixed and flexible route service that helps provide a cost-efficient way to connect folks to the system. the current transit studies underway, Arizona Avenue Alternatives Analysis. This is looking at high capacity transit in the Arizona Avenue corridor. It seems like this study has been underway for many, many years. We look to conclude that study sometime in the coming months. That will ultimately give us a corridor analysis for Arizona Avenue and different options, whether that includes light rail or bus rapid transit, whatever's the most makes the most sense for our area. That's what we're certainly going to be looking at. And then Price Road Flexible Transit Study, that's kind of our first chunk of that flexible transit program that I mentioned before. We really want to test it and see if it works in that area. We do have a lot of employers in that area, and they're continually asking our city for support when it comes to getting their workforce to the area. And as I noted, because of the geography, perhaps a flexible transit would be the best option to serve them. So we're studying that in more detail. So with that, I am available to join the rest of the panel for questions, unless there's any for me right now.
Thank you, Ryan. Very interesting. Everything that's going around the city and the county, really. We do have some questions, several questions actually. We're gonna try to move quickly so we can get to our elected officials' presentations. But me go in order here. All right, so one of the questions I have here from Q&A is, how will the large land acquisition by D.R. Horton to the east of Maricopa County affect the future development for transportation? Who would like to take on that one?
I'll take a start. I noted earlier that MAG originally was just representing our planning area just in Maricopa County. But after the 2010 census, our geography, our planning area expanded to the growing Santan region into Pinal County. And I think that will continue to be a challenge for us. It's the reason why an SR 24 extension, as noted, is so important for regional connectivity, as we continue to expect those development interests and pressures to continue to grow in the greater Santan region. Our partners, Pinal County, also have a dedicated sales tax. In fact, they have enabled their full cent for transportation investments. They have 2 half cents stacked and intend for some of those fundings to go to those major corridor projects, including initial right-of-way acquisition and establishment of an interim north-south freeway facility, partnering on the SR 24 extension as well. I think we're continuing to work with Pinal County to establish that arterial grid network that we'll need to layer in, as well as our municipal partners, including Queen Creek, the town of Queen Creek that expands into Pinal County as well. Certainly a lot of challenges for that growing region, and dynamic, because the origin destination pattern, we have a lot of folks living in that area but working in Maricopa County, and so there's this pressure coming up through the Southeast Valley. So those are things we're considering. Those projects are in our needs catalog as we evaluate our potential fiscally constrained options moving forward.
Thank you, Audra. Thank you so much. Another question sorry.
Jack, I'll just
Yeah.
add a little bit to that.
Thank you, Jack.
With Skybridge going on at Gateway Airport, in addition to the people moving into that region who actually work in Maricopa County, that we are going to have some major traffic issues in dealing with that. And that's the reason I stay very involved with the Pinal County Supervisors and others on, and their approved sales tax is still held up in court because of a lawsuit, even though they've accumulated some money and they're anxious to get started moving. But we have a lot of work to do in that area, and I'm staying very connected with them.
Thank you, Supervisor Sellers. Thank you. So we have this other one here. Question on the issues with the rubberized asphalt being replaced with white concrete, which has caused serious concerns from our residents along the 101 and the 202. What is the plan to bring back the quieter rubberized for our residents, which was that?
Yeah, nobody's going to like the answer to this,
Okay.
but this really becomes a funding issue.
Okay.
Right now, the maintenance budget at ADOT does not allow for maintaining rubberized asphalt, which goes away in about 10 years, as we've painfully learned recently. And so they look for less expensive alternatives. And, their noise measurements say that this is very close to being as good as. We're getting a lot of feedback from people that are not happy with it. But I think the only solution will be if people can convince someone that we need more money in our maintenance budgets, if they really want to do something different than what's being done.
All right. Thank you. I'll do one more because we're running out of time. So in the interest of everybody's time, and we're gonna send all the questions, the additional ones to the panelists for answers, and then we can share that at a later time. So the last one would be, what is the plan to handle the impact of the additional traffic from the new apartments and businesses on the smaller side streets of downtown Chandler?
I guess that one's for me. So
Go for it.
yeah, we continue to look at that as development occurs in the downtown, and we want to make sure that it continues to have the level of service, the balance, like I mentioned, between a pedestrian network and a roadway network. And so as each new development comes in, there's certainly a traffic analysis, and then recommendations are made for the type of development and ultimately the different treatments that it may take to serve the area. So it really is a kind of a case by case. I know it doesn't seem like there's a specific plan associated with that, but it really goes into our downtown planning area and the commitment to ensure that the whole system down here works. So a balance of bike and pedestrian, roadway network, as well as transit-oriented development.
Thank you, Ryan. I guess there's more to see in that regard as we get more population there and traffic. We're gonna move forward with introduction of our elected officials. We have Councilmember Ellis. We have 1 minute in the interest of time, and welcome.
Can you hear me now, everybody?
Yes.
Yeah, really appreciate that, having a moment to say hi to our colleagues here. I see Supervisor Seller, say hello to you, and Ms. Thomas, this was an amazing presentation. Thank you so much, so impactful with what's really needed right now and where we're going. I'm looking forward to see what this region has in store. You have put such a great plan with your team to move us forward into the 21st century and beyond. And that's exactly what Chandler is looking for. Ryan, thank you so much, Mr. Peters, for putting this presentation together. Really appreciate it. As you all can see, and those who are listening right now, Chandler, we are not staying behind. We are moving forward. We are continually toe-to-toe with the county, working together with them to see where we're going and how we're going to lead into everything. We're taking our position as a leader, and we are not falling back. We are staying in that position and encouraging the region to keep pushing through. I am on the road myself also. I see my counterpart there, he's on the road too. So we are all on the road. Currently, I'm actually cranking out managers and caregivers to put them into the pipeline to work. We need transportation for our workforce to keep moving throughout our cities and be in other cities to get their job done. Thank you so much for everything. Really appreciate it. Chamber, great job as always. Those policy impact, keep them coming. We really appreciate them. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Ellis. And now we have Councilmember Harris, please.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much. Excuse my attire. I am doing some early workouts, trying to get, your health and wealth. You got to get it all mixed together. But I wanted to say thank you so much for the presentations. I really enjoyed it. Again, thank you, Terri and Chamber, for your leadership in this area. We really do appreciate it. I just want to say that, Jack and Supervisor Jack and others that's on here, I just want to say thank you so much. Chandler, look as everyone as a partner as we develop the greater the greater area of Chandler, and transportation is a big part. Roads is a big part. Everything that we talked about is a big part of it. Chandler doesn't look to work in a vacuum. We work with our partners in a regional perspective. And thank you so much for your leadership, Ryan. As always, great job. Always representing the city of Chandler very, very well. With that being said, I just want to say thank you. Again, I'm Councilmember Harris, and thank you for your time.
Thank you,
All right.
Councilmember Harris. Go ahead, Terry. Thank you.
Boy, we have had a jam-packed session. Thank you, Eileen. Great information. This recording will be available on our YouTube channel. We are going to get all the questions and answers and get those to our panelists and get some responses back so that we can also send those out to the individuals that submitted them. And I just want to thank each of our panelists for being here. Policy is very important to Chandler. Transportation, we really view it here in Chandler as an economic development tool, and it is critical for our continued growth and as we continue to develop as a community. So thank you. I want to invite you to join us on April 9th. We will have our representatives from LD 18 joining us. That is in West Chandler, Senator Bowie, Representative Germain, and Representative Epstein. And then on May 14th, we will have our representatives from LD 17 here to answer your questions and give you updates. So thank you again to our sponsors, Salt River Products, Air Products, Dignity Health, Chandler Regional Medical Center, Catalyst Computer Technologies, Intel, Southwest Gas, Terri McKibbin, Edward Jones, and Dragon Walk Restaurant. So thank you again for our sponsors. Thank you again to our panelists. And Elin, thank you for your continued support and your leadership with our Public Policy Committee. Join us again. See you on April 9th. Stay safe and healthy.